Hi everyone, I thought we'd take a quick break from Nimzovich and theory in order to continue a series started some time ago, Magnus Watch. Fans of Nimzovich need not worry, as we will return to him in due course. Magnus Carlsen is now officially the highest rated player in the history of chess, with a rating of 2861, 10 points ahead of Kasparov at his peak, and 50 points clear of Kramnik, who is currently the second highest rated player in the world. There is no doubt that we are witnessing history in the making. The Weekend Z tournament is just around the corner, which will surely grasp the attention of chess lovers worldwide, and in March we will have the Candidates tournament to decide who will play Anand for the title later in the year. Thus an exciting year lies ahead. Also in the Candidates tournament is Svidler, Kramnik, Radjabov, Ivanchuk, Aronian, Gelfand and Grishuk. So for the continuation of this series, I thought we would have a look at how Carlsen has fared against these players in the past. The game I chose for this video was played at the Amber Chess Tournament in Monte Carlo in 2010. It was a blindfold game, and Carlsen had the black pieces against Svidler, who opened with e4. Let me just flip this so we can see it from Carlsen's perspective. He responded with c5, which is the Sicilian defense, and it's an opening that he employs fairly regularly against 1e4, although he is renowned for playing a wide range of openings, which makes him hard to prepare to play, in match format or even just for a single game in a tournament. It's one of his many strengths. Play continued with one of the many book lines, knight f3 and d6. Point of this move, or the threat of this move, is to play e5 to create a bind on the d4 square. So generally speaking, white will play d4 to prevent that. So this is obviously all still long established as best play. And we saw the standard continuation, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Now knight f6 attacking the e4 pawn, and now knight c3 defending it. And here Carlsen played g6, which is the dragon variation, so called because the kingside pawns here resemble the constellation Draco, which is the dragon. Carlsen is one of the few top grandmasters who is still willing to play this opening, although he's not done so since 2010. Svidler continued with bishop e2, which is going into the classical dragon, as opposed to the sharper Yugoslav attack lines with the bishop c4 instead of e2. And here Carlsen continued development with bishop g7. Obviously this is going to be played, so nothing better to do at the moment, may as well play it. And now both sides castle short, and of course white's sharpest response to the Sicilian is to castle long and pawn storm, but Svidler chose to avoid such a scenario. It's probably a good idea when you're playing against Carlsen. So play continued bishop e3, and one of the advantages of playing bishop e2 instead of bishop c4 is that you can play bishop e3, preparing to challenge the Fianchetto bishop here with something like queen d2. You don't have to worry about knight g4, which would be possible if the bishop was on c4. And here Carlsen played knight c6, which creates some pressure on the d4 knight in conjunction with the latent pressure from the bishop here on g7. And Svidler was compelled to deal with this pressure right away, answering with knight b3. And we're still well within theory at this point. So next game a6 from Carlsen, preventing white from using b5 for his pieces, which he may like to do, and also preparing queenside expansion with b5 and so on. One of the drawbacks of the dragon is that with the bishop here on g7, it's a lot more weakening than normal for black to push in the center with e6 or e5, because this d6 pawn is a lot weaker because the bishop is on g7. It would usually be on e7 where it can defend. So usually black won't push with his e-pawn in the center in the dragon setups. So Svidler now press forward on a king side with f4, and he's hoping to play e5 at the right moment, you know, with due preparation, which will give black some problems to solve, like where's he going to put this knight and how will he deal with knight d5, etc. after that. And we now see some similar ideas to positions that have already been covered in the series on Nimzowitsch, with both sides fighting for control of an important central square, e5 in this case, with white trying to push and kick the knight and black trying to prevent white from pushing. And Carlsen is playing provocatively here, and provoking this f4 has weakened the e4 pawn and the e4 square, so if he can try and exploit that, then he's done well. And he can do this immediately with b5, which is what Carlsen played, you know, threatening b4 and then simply knight takes e4. So we'll play on both sides of the board in standard Sicilian style. So Svidler, of course, has seen this idea, and he defended the threat with bishop f3, which takes aim at this loose knight here on c6 and eyes the rook on a8, and Carlsen dealt with that immediately with bishop b7. The drawback of this is that it allows the e5 push immediately because the bishop is loose here on b7, and so white is able to gain good space after d takes e5, f takes e5, and knight d7, and of course not knight takes e5, bishop takes b7. And you know, like I said, black has been playing provocatively, and Svidler has gladly accepted the bait. He has gained space, but it comes at the cost of weak squares after knight d7. As long as he retains control of the position, it shouldn't be a problem, but he's now faced with the question of how to defend the e5 pawn, and in actual fact it can't be done because it's attacked 3 times and it's undefended, and the only other option is advancing it, which he did, but you know, the point is that after e6, strictly speaking it is a pawn sack, but black would have to be crazy to try and hold on to the material, because after f takes e6 comes bishop g4. This is going to win back the pawn, or it's going to force black into a very passive position. Obviously he can't push e5 here, he's dropping a piece on d7, e5, in fact queen d5 check is the strongest move, and now after king h8, now bishop takes d7, and obviously it's winning for white. So after bishop g4, Carlsen played rook takes f1, which is the best move, and after queen takes f1 he played knight c e5, which interestingly Fritz wasn't so keen on, preferring instead knight f8, which I'll show you in a second. And it's interesting really because it's, you know, the difference between a materialistic computer and a positional genius, because I mean Carlsen quite simply has played to weaken the e-file and then plant a piece on e5. You can see all his pieces are directed at it and supporting it. So therefore knight c5, unleashing the bishop as well, you know, is what his strategy has revolved around. And Fritz gives, you know, a tiny edge, well, about half a pawn to white here, which means that black has not, you know, a slightly inferior position, because he's a pawn up, and yeah, white is ahead on the evaluation. So what Fritz preferred was knight f8, giving the position as equal, and this, you know, maintains the pawn But like I said, it's very passive, and white would have good compensation after, for example, rook d1, attacking the queen, queen c7, and now knight c5. And yeah, I mean, there's pressure immediately again on e6 with the knight and the bishop. Knight takes b7 is a threat, and all kinds of other stuff. Black is getting very active. Oh, sorry, white is getting very active, and black is getting very passive. So knight c e5 is what Carlsen played. Anyway, okay, that's the end of part 1.